Hello there, fellow TikTokers. My name is Jedediah, and this is Jedediah's Corner, and it's just a brief, informative video. There's a lot of agencies in the UN that are currently being talked about, and let me go over the relevance of a few. The ICJ is the highest court in the world. They deal with serious breaches of human rights and, in a lot of cases, issues of apartheid, genocide, and ethnic cleansing. Now, there's also the International Criminal Court, although the prosecutor for the International Criminal Court has been sitting on cases against Israel of human rights abuses that they have committed both in Gaza and in the West Bank that have just been stalled and sitting on his desk. Then there is the Security Council. We saw yesterday in the Security Council, the United States used their veto vote to scorn the will of the world and essentially be the only one standing in the way of a ceasefire and peace. Now, if you remember, at the beginning of this crisis, after October 7th, when Israel started their indiscriminate bombing, the Security Council called for a ceasefire. About 1,000 or 2,000 Palestinians have been killed at that point. They said no, and they subsequently did it 3 more times. Each time, roughly 10,000 innocent civilians were killed. I hate to say this, but it has been true from the beginning, and it's been true for a long time. The United States, my country, is complicit in this genocide, in this apartheid, and they provide cover for Israel with public relations and propaganda. Also, by using their veto vote to stall any type of meaningful negotiations. The Oslo Accords were a poison pill given to the Palestinian people that essentially put them into limbo, where these talks of endless negotiations go nowhere, and Israel continues their project of ethnic cleansing, settling the land with these illegal settlements. So, there's another body of the UN called the General Assembly. In this assembly, the United States does not have a veto vote. They can issue recommendations from a legal basis. And I would recommend, I'll put the link in the video description, everyone here watching the first day of deliberation. It clearly lays out in a legal way not just what Israel is doing right now in Gaza, but what they have done over this decades-long occupation, blockade, and apartheid system. The General Assembly has been meeting for the last 3 or 4 days and deliberating. There are 50 countries involved in this discussion in the General Assembly, and only 2 are arguing against the Palestinian cause and arguing for Israel. Of course, that is the United States and some small, tiny country that they essentially just hold their funding over their head and threaten them to vote with the United States. Right now, the ICJ case, that's right, I was going to mention this, it's kind of a clunky video. The ICJ case. Now, Rabbi Shmuley, who I had never actually seen before, I'd heard his name quite a bit, debated Norman Finkelstein. And Rabbi Shmuley doesn't seem like a very spiritual man. I don't know how he's a religious leader. But I do know what Jesus said about his type in Matthew 23 and 24. So, of course, there are going to be corrupt religious leaders, and he seems to be very, very, very corrupt. He also talks like a WWE wrestler, which seems kind of strange, considering that he's a quote-unquote rabbi. But anyways, Rabbi Shmuley lied directly to the public several times by saying that the ICJ case, Israel won the ICJ case. They said, no, Israel's not committing a genocide. So let me explain this to you. If you go commit a crime in the United States, you're first brought to what is called a preliminary hearing. In the preliminary hearing, what is done, they take out the evidence and the court decides, whether there is enough evidence to move forward with the case. And that is what the ICJ did. They looked at the evidence, and they did not say Israel is not guilty of a genocide. They said Israel is potentially guilty of a genocide, and that allows the case to go on. A month from the date of the case, which is coming up very soon, if not today, Israel is required to send a report back to the ICJ showing how they obeyed their ruling and the provisional measures that were set forward. Now, we all know, if we've been paying attention to what's going on in Gaza, that they ignored every single provisional measure. They got on TV and said, we reject this case, and they called it blood libel. That is something that I guess to Jewish people is a real serious accusation, but to most of us, that really doesn't mean anything. So anyways, yeah, Israel got what they wanted. They got what they wanted. They destroyed all the hospitals, all the infrastructure. They defunded UNRWA, which they've been trying to do for decades. And now people are going to starve. People are starving and dying. They're going to die from disease and starvation. So the U.S., holding up their hand, dripping with blood, 4 times, has caused roughly 10,000 people to die. This last veto may very well see that death toll rise to the hundreds of thousands. There are 1.5 million people in Rafah who are food insecure, who have limbs blown off, holding on for dear life, patients who can't receive medical treatment, aid trucks being blocked on their way in, no matter what Elon Levy wants to say and all these stupid pictures that he's showing. The reality is they have caused the situation to become so catastrophic, so dangerous. They have not stopped bombing for one day the entire time. Well, maybe during that one ceasefire where they got back about 48% of their hostages. They could have had them all back on October 8th. They don't want to negotiate, and they don't want the Palestinians to have a state. A lot of the people that Hamas is trying to rescue from these Israeli prison camps, the people that they're trying to rescue are people that could be political leaders. And Israel has been systematically locking up all of their political leaders. Anyone who could potentially be a spokesman for their cause has been thrown in prison. And now, rich Western governments, along with Israel, who is potentially guilty of a genocide, are saying that they and they alone will decide how this situation gets resolved. For the last 30 years, we know how they've tried to resolve this situation by ignoring it, by falling back on we're negotiating while stealing more and more land, while passing laws to strengthen the apartheid system within Israel and the occupied territories. You're going to see violence come from the civilians now in Gaza. And just imagine in your own neighborhood, if your own neighborhood had been bombed for 4 months straight, and you go on your phone and you see the world court say that the people who are bombing you are potentially guilty of a genocide, and you go on your phone and you see everyone crying out for your cause, but you look at the reality and the bombs don't stop falling, the snipers keep blowing off limbs and killing children and women, grandmothers, grandfathers, daughters, brothers, uncles, whole families completely decimated and killed in the most sadistic way. In a sadistic way. Look at what the Hilltop Boys did a couple of weeks after this conflict. They want to talk about mass rape? Show me the evidence. But you know what I have already? Evidence of Israel raping women in their prison. Evidence of IDF soldiers raping other female IDF soldiers. Evidence of people who have held high positions in the government who have done very, very dubious things. Very scandalous things. I'm not going to go into them here, but there is a disturbing trend in Israel. If you allow this to go on without holding them accountable, as you have for the last 100+ years, then this region will see nothing but violence. You will create multitudes of terrorists. Think about it from you now. What if this had happened to you? What if for 4 months your neighborhood was bombed? And you are starving, literally starving. Starvation causes people to act in incredibly extreme ways. If you've never been hungry before, you have no idea. Hunger is one of the most cruel forms of collective punishment. God bless the people in Gaza. Salam.